What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro-Black Blurred Kingdom podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about something that I spoke about a while ago on Instagram and actually got a little bit heated in the comments. Today, I want to talk to you all about the overabundance and portrayal of interracial couples in white comic media. I also want to go into detail about the apprehension of interracial couples, specifically the black person in that relationship, and them calling out white supremacy. Later, what I will do is go on to tell you all a personal story of an individual that I know who fits the criteria of what is being spoken about today. If you look at white comic media, and really, if I'm being honest here, all media in general, there has been a forceful agenda out there that pushes interracial relationships. So what I want to make very clear with that point is a lot of people throw out the word agenda, and for good reason, because there's a lot of agendas that are going on in this world. It's not just interracial relationships. You see a lot of agendas with LGBT. You see a lot of agendas with weakening the black man. You see a lot of agendas with masculinizing the black woman or making her strong and independent. There's a lot of different agendas that are out there. But I wanted to make that emphasis because a lot of people, whenever you say agenda, immediately think you're just talking about LGBT and that being overly pushed. And that's anything that is pushed in a cryptic and sneaky way that is different than what would normally and organically happen. I feel like I have to spell that out for people because I think that there's a lot of stigmas that get tied to whenever you say agenda. It just does, because a lot of people already think that you're being very close-minded, like whatever the case is. A lot of people like to just make a lot of statements like that. So I want to make it clear that when there's an agenda out and there is just something that somebody's classified as, those are two different things. There's a difference between being LGBT and there being an LGBT agenda. Those are two different things, and the agenda part is what I want to make sure that people understand is the part that's different. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Even to a certain extent, the whole trauma porn thing is somewhat of an agenda for black people. And let me clarify what I mean by that and why I'm also against that. Whenever you look on TV, every single time you turn around, it's a image of a black person who's getting beat down, whooped on, or whatever the case is by the police. That is an agenda. So in other words, that is seemingly supposed to be for the benefit of black people, for us to look and say, oh, guess what? White people are clued into what's happening to us, and they're with us in the struggle and in solidarity, quote unquote. A lot of people like to throw that shit around too, with us. That's an agenda. That's an agenda because it's literally done because that white person or whoever those producers are don't want to create this image as if they are not culturally sound. They want to show that they care about diversity, which is going to bring them ratings and viewers and all these other things as well too. In the meantime, as us as black people are watching this, what is it doing? Is breaking our spirits to continue to see the things go on TV that actually happen to us in real life every single day, sometimes even worse than what's being portrayed. So I'm against that as well too, and I think that specifically targets black folks. So my thing is, well, if I'm a black person, this has nothing to do with me being against a certain group. This is explaining the difference between the agenda of it being pushed and it being a thing. Again, very irritated that I have to even explain that, but I wanted to just put that out there before we even got started. Whew. Anyway, going back to what I was saying about forceful agendas that are being pushed for interracial relationships. Mind you, I don't watch cable television much. But people tell me that when they do, they happen to just watch a show and it goes to commercial and boom, right there goes an interracial couple right in their face. And my issue again with this isn't interracial dating per se, but more so the idea that there are so many harmonious interracial couples that are being pushed, and it far outclasses the number of successful and non-toxic black couples, meaning a heterosexual man and a heterosexual woman being pushed. And to me, that's basically non-existent. When you look at the media, think about how dysfunctional all the black relationships are. And at this point, we're talking again about the white comic media. A lot of times it'll be a situation where the black man is a thug or angry or a brood or unfaithful or something else, and the black woman is overbearing, masculine, bitchy, or something else like that is just not helpful to having a sound and appealing relationship with a black man. This is very much showcased on the show Black Lightning. If you look at Black Lightning, look at the relationship that goes on between Lynn and Jefferson. That is a very good example of what I mean by relationships where both parties in that couple are black, are heterosexual, are made to look like they're not appealing. That is the perfect example, because if you look at Lynn, she's overbearing. She is a bitch. Let's be real. Lynn was a bitch. Everybody can admit when watching Black Lightning that Lynn was a bitch. And she just doesn't seem to have a functional relationship with Jefferson. And Jefferson is just getting browbeat all the damn time on this show by this woman. So now he's not appearing as masculine at this point as he could, because his woman is not allowing herself to be feminine enough to allow him to be able to lead in the way that he wants to lead. So that's showcased like that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that these shows want to make sure that they make those types of relationships unappealing in every single way that they can. However, the same is not true for the numerous interracial relationships that exist in white comic media. And the thing is, you have a lot of examples of interracial couples as well too. And at this point, I'm speaking not just that are on screen, but also in the actual comic books as well too. And let's think about that for a second. Just to give a few examples, you got Barry and Iris on The Flash. Yes, they made Iris into a black woman, but they put her with Barry, who was still a white man, and they're married. And for the most part, they don't really have problems for real. Some people can say, oh, if you look at season 6, then you'll see that the mirror Iris had an issue with. Stop all that. The bottom line is that for the most part, if you look at Barry and Iris's relationship, Barry being a white man, Iris being a black woman, they basically don't really have problems like that for real. It's a pretty harmonious and steady going relationship. Then you've got, I'll just give you another example, Cloak and Dagger. If you look at Cloak and Dagger, the show, obviously that's the direction that they were going in with their relationship, because in the comics they actually ended up getting together. And boy, when I tell you that they did not want Ty to be with that black girl, it was very obvious that they did not want Ty to be with that black girl in that show. Especially in season 2, they were trying to break them up something tough. That's because they wanted Ty to be with Tandy. They wanted to make sure that you knew this was the end goal. They were end goal. They were always put together. They were always meant to be together because of their powers. And they emphasized that all throughout the show. Mind you, in this situation, Tandy is the white girl and Ty is the black guy in this situation. The last relationship that I want to talk about is Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. Once again, if you look at the TV show, obviously they don't keep them together, and then there's some issues with the show ending prematurely. Both well, I wouldn't say Jessica. I think Jessica had an appropriate ending, just my opinion. But Luke Cage ending prematurely, right? You have all these little things that are thrown in there. But if you look at the dynamics of the relationship that was going on between Luke and Jessica, it's obvious that they took a lot of time into building chemistry between these two characters, as if they were great matches for one another. And they did the same thing if you look in the comic books. They had a very steady relationship with each other, and they ended up having a kid together. But if you look at the relationships that Luke had outside of Jessica, it ends up being a little bit of a dysfunctional dynamic. With Misty, which is not really a relationship, it was more like a one-night stand. The issue was that it was a one-night stand. And Misty, from my perspective, just the way that she interacted with Luke, I thought that it was flowing kind of nicely. But then they turned it into this thing where it was a one-night stand. She was overbearing and over the top and annoying and always trying to catch his ass up in some shit that he wasn't supposed to be doing. And it just looked like it just wasn't going to go anywhere, therefore it didn't. When he got with Claire, it turned into a whole angry black man type of thing. Luke looked like he didn't have control of his emotions, and he was gonna punch Claire, and that's why he punched the wall. Then she leaves him and all this other stuff. So then there was that going on. So that was made to look dysfunctional too. Like, they started them off all right, but then they made that to look dysfunctional. And it was very clear that there was still something there at a certain point. If you look at Defenders, and even if you look at when Luke came onto Jessica's show, that they still had somewhat of a connection. It was very obvious that somewhat of a connection existed between those two, as if they were some type of end game. Mind you, Luke is a black man and Jessica is a white woman. And mind you, I'm not gonna lie, I actually kind of liked them. I did. But the point is that if you look, there's such an overabundance of these relationships that are going on, like these interracial relationships, despite how I may feel about the two characters, because I'm attached to them as characters. I think that there were a lot of situations where they could have went a different route, because I've seen comic movies and shows and things like that do that. I mean, consider the idea that in Arrow, they had Oliver with Felicity Smoke, and he really should have been with the Black Canary. And then it basically turned into the Felicity show. I always say that season 7 of Arrow basically was called Overwatch instead of Arrow. And that's because they really made it about Felicity at this point, because she was an over-pushed love interest of Oliver. That was like his wife, and that's who he ended up having a child with at a certain point, that child being Mia. Anyway, point I'm trying to make is that, like, they can change comic storylines if they want to, so they had every opportunity, if they wanted to put Luke with Misty, and I think that they would have gelled really well together if they really would have pushed it that way, but instead they gave them a very cantankerous relationship. And I just need to say this, and some of you all are probably not going to like me after I say it, but I just need to keep it a buck with everybody who is listening. Another interracial relationship that existed, that sometimes, I'm going to say sometimes, that other people don't want to talk about, is the relationship between your boy Miles Morales' parents. That was somewhat of an interracial relationship, but nobody wants to speak on it. Now, in some cases, they portrayed her as a black Latina, and obviously his father is a black American man. But in some cases, they made her race either ambiguous, so she was an ambiguously raced Latina, because a lot of people don't understand this. Being Latina or Latino or any type of Hispanic is not a race, it's more of a culture. They made her racially ambiguous as a Latina in some cases, and then in other cases, one could argue that she was a white Latina even, which would therefore make that interracial. My problem is that there was some off-codeness with the way that Miles Morales was rewritten and created, and his name and all this other stuff, and then even like the changing of the hair. There was a lot of weird stuff that was going on there. But because of all of the weirdness, one could infer that that would in some cases be considered an interracial relationship that, from the outside looking in, caused a lot of confusion about what happened with that character. Now, I won't talk too deep into Miles Morales and his hair and the off-codeness of his name and all this other stuff. I won't talk too deep on that, but I just wanted to make that point that some of y'all are not going to like me for this, but Miles Morales' parents were in an interracial relationship to a certain extent. And now, going back to the points that I made, I know a lot of you are probably listening to this and you're like, well, if you look at Luke and Jessica, they broke up in the MCU. You're naming examples of people who broke up, blah, 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 blah. The point of the matter is, and this is what I need y'all to understand, it's more about the fact that they made these relationships look appealing. Not whether or not they did or did not stay together. They made it look appealing. Even when they did break up in the show, it didn't make them look unappealing, and they didn't seem to be characters that didn't have chemistry anymore. It was very clear that these two characters had a lot of chemistry, and any interracial relationship that they've done in these shows, they did that the exact same way. Now, let me tell you why I think a lot of this stuff is being done the way that it's done. Why, in my opinion, that they push interracial relationships the way that they do. Personally, I think that interracial relationships are pushed because the idea is to make black relationships seem less appealing overall. It encourages black people to embrace integration in a way. Think about how big of a deal integration is in our society. Blacks are forced to have codependent relationships with white society without them having control of anything through integration. What is being said is that this is created as a solution to living in a more inclusionary society where black people are allowed to enjoy the same privileges of society as their non-black counterparts, and given equality, and even now in some cases, like white people even say equity, given those things. But the reality is that this is a facade. And it's especially a facade given that nothing has really changed about the way our people are treated. We're still getting killed. We're still getting no reparations or tangibles. We still have to hear microaggressions and little slick shit and see videos of white people doing scurvy shit to us. And it's all happening from white supremacy. Meanwhile, benign neglect is kicking us in the ass, as I've said before. This so-called integrated society is targeted in education systems, employment systems, political systems, and in many other places. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you all know who Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. is, but he had a system of 9 areas where white supremacy tries to take hold. And I'm not going to list them out on this video. I'll talk about them maybe on another video or whatever, but that is like the extent of how far it can go. If you look at media, it's almost as if in this situation, like with interracial relationships that they portray in comics and just in media in general, it's as if they are trying to target sexual integration. And I will speak my thoughts about integration fully another day, another topic, and how that relates to black people, but I just wanted to make that point to y'all. In a way, they are sending a message to us that says they need to keep us separated from our people by not making the relationships we have with one another appealing, and how it can look more appealing with someone else who knows nothing about our culture, nor can they properly embrace it for the most part. Hell, the worst part about all this is it's not even like you are being taken seriously in a lot of these relationships. They are showcased for the purpose of making a statement and showing, again, they're using you as a shield to say I'm not racist, which is very far from the truth. And, you know, I'll give you an example of that. Think about Kid Rock, who was from Romeo, not Detroit, from Romeo, Michigan. And he has a black daughter, yet he's walking around swinging a Confederate flag. And let's be real here. He can't even use the Southern pride excuse because he's from the North. So what does that tell you about his reasoning for doing it? What it tells you is that it's now about liking, supporting, and being in collusion with the idea that we should be in a time where black people were enslaved, meaning that he is a white supremacist. That's really what it means. Because a lot of people like to say, white people will say, oh, if I fly the Southern Pride flag or the Confederate flag, that means it's a symbol of Southern pride, which is a bunch of bullshit. But in this case, he especially can't do it because he is from Romeo. So there was even like this little, I just wanted to say this real quick. There was even this little cartoon that I was watching, and it was like a black man, and he was with this Asian woman, and then I think he accidentally messed up something that one of the little Asian kids had, and they made him sleep on the couch, and he just didn't even seem intimate with this chick, and all this other stuff. I was watching that, and I was looking, and I'm like, this is what I mean when I say, like, we're not even really taken seriously in those relationships to a certain extent, because look how the brother was being treated. He didn't even look like he was a real partner. He looked like he was just there for the optics. That's about it. Like, for the idea that, oh, look, it's a guy who is black who's with an Asian person. So that's just like the idea of like on-screen optics at that point. And you know, I need to say something to y'all, Cool Click. I have got to say this to y'all. I don't know what it is about interracial daters. And at this point, I'm now talking about the realistic situations, not like something that I see on a comic TV show or in a comic book. I don't know what it is about these interracial daters, but it's like they feel this hyper insecurity, like the black community has disowned them, or like someone is trying to diss them or something. It's like a weird trauma response and somewhat of a passive aggressive entitlement, like no one should ever criticize them for their decision. And I'll give you an example of that. Look at Alfonso Ribeiro, who played Carlton on Fresh Prince. When he made that comment about how the black community disowned him, we were all looking and we were like, no one was even thinking about him. No one was even thinking about him or criticizing him or anything like that. Not that I've seen. Nobody was really talking about him for real like that. And a lot of us, if we're being honest, if you look at the actor, not like Carlton, because if you think about it, Carlton actually only kicked it with black women. Let's be honest here. Like, as much of a kind of preppy, kind of weird, nerdy dude as he was, he really was low-key pro-black, and nobody really wants to say it because he only messed with black women. Let's be clear. The actor is different. We kind of knew what his get-up was. And I think even one of his little stand-up comedies, he said something about getting him some, like, having a good night and getting him some white women to go or something like, he said something like that, some type of joke. Anyway, the black community as a majority, as far as I know, hasn't really dissed him like that. And when he made the comment, it definitely wasn't going on. I mean, he wasn't even really on anybody's radar for real. Or I'll give you an even worse example. Think about Tamara Mowry, who made it a point to talk about how people diss her for her openly racist husband. Or they say that her husband is racist. Then she made a big statement to say, or to explain why her husband is not a racist. And there are two problems with this in her case. Number one, no one was checking for Tamara like that. Like, literally no one had really even thought about her. Literally no one. Actually, her sister, who has a black husband and seems to have a, cute little family dynamic, is really, if we're being honest here, more relevant than she is. And Tamara is the co-star of the TV show The Real, so she really should be more relevant overall. Number two, she is 100% wrong, and she did all of that splaining and lying in order to try to cover up the fact that her husband was a suspected white supremacist. And it's funny, I think Tariq Nasheed a while back, he pointed out something or some things that her husband said that were rather suspect. Some of those comments that he made were about Trayvon Martin getting killed by George Zimmerman, and how that was not about race and in fighting and killing and in tragedy, but the aftermath became about race because people made it about that and they wanted to benefit from that. So it's as if he's trying to blame black people or something like that for the fact that they said that this was a racial thing, which, let's be clear, that was a racial thing. It was. There's no disputing that. There's no disputing that. And the fact that he said that was as if to say that black people were trying to make it about race when it wasn't, as if to vilify the truth that we know is in front of us. He then said Zimmerman should not face vigilant justice. And I think he even made some comments about white genocide in South Africa, and he made some references to Nelson Mandela. Anyway, go look it up for yourself. I'm just furthering my point that he's made a lot of weird comments and said a lot of weird shit. And it's like, Tamara, if you're getting any criticism, it's because you were doing all this splaining and you chose to marry this dude, so you should really understand why people in the black community would criticize you for that. Then you have the nerve to say people are choosing not to look past love, or they're choosing to look past love and they're looking towards hate. So that sounds like some like love has no color type shit. I'm just not really with all that. And don't get me wrong, I'm pro-black and all, but I'm not even one of those people who goes around dogging those who date someone who dates someone outside their race, because there are quite a bit of people who are in the pro-black and conscious community who aren't really feeling it, and they really have their reasons. They do. So let me kind of go into my thoughts a little bit about what I think about interracial dating and my feelings on it. Personally, I don't have a problem with it per se, especially if you can successfully get a partner on code with you to embrace your culture properly, but good luck with that. I'm gonna be honest with you, good luck with that. I think there are some things that those who interracially date need to consider, though, before they interracially date. Number one, I don't believe you can call yourself pro-black. This is my belief. I don't believe that you can call yourself pro-black per se if you are currently dating interracially or culturally, because the statement you have made in your marriage is that black people do not come first, but more so that love has no color and they are on the same priority list as everyone in your mind, because it's all about being a good human. And the reason why I know is because a lot of times a lot of other issues will be focused on at that point. So it won't be about like the fact that black people's needs will be served. It'll be about the fact that, it's all about being a good citizen. Sometimes they focus on things that are related to LGBT. Sometimes they focus on other quote unquote liberal agendas and things like that. Second point. Economically and culturally, it can become an issue because the money you obtain in your marriage, even if it's with the intent to go back to the black community, will to some extent go back into white pockets, especially if you die before your husband or wife does and you happen to be black. And culturally, it's a problem because that white person seldom tries to embrace your culture, but has the expectation that you will embrace theirs. And even sometimes their embracing looks like appropriation instead of finding critical ways to putting money back into black pockets and checking the folks in their own culture who do white supremacist shit. Think about how frustrating it has to be kicking it with someone. Then when you go over to their house for family dinner and they get this racist grandparent over there or some shit like that your partner has not disowned yet, and you got to play nice with them, or you look like the bad person. Like, who wants to keep having to explain themselves or having to be in fight mode around somebody's family at a dinner? Further, why is it your job to change their minds through your present anger? Point number 3, sometimes it becomes a thing of dissing the opposite sex. This is not always the case, but this is sometimes the case. Sometimes it becomes a thing of dissing the opposite sex in your community because of one bad experience, when there are tons of beautiful black women or great black men out there who are exactly what you need. I'm going to keep it a buck with you, though. Usually the bad experience crowd, from what I've seen, are black women wanting to go to the other side because they had a terrible black man. And with black men, usually they get to bashing sisters when they just grow up with coonish beliefs and in those environments and start saying shit like black women have attitudes. But again, that's to me, and that's my perception. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people of another race or culture who aren't attractive out there. So I don't want to make that, I'm not making that claim, because I do think that there are like people who are of another race and cultures who are attractive that aren't black. But me personally, my loyalty is to the black community, and I love everything about sisters, from the way they look, to the way that they act, to the way that they speak, the way that they show joy, and even sometimes when they be going in. I love it. I'm just being honest, I love it. I just had to make the point, though, that those who interracially date sometimes get touchy when it comes to that personal choice. And my man Eli, who supports me on a lot of like my stuff and on Colas Creative, he made a good point on one of my posts when I brought up this topic. And he said, by the way, shout out to I believe his podcast is called Southern Frame of Mind Podcast. If I said that incorrectly, feel free to let me know later, bro. But if y'all have not checked it out yet, y'all should go and check it out. But he made a point that said a lot of folks who date interracially or have friends who aren't black are afraid to offend them by speaking up for themselves and their race. And I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it really was true, and it was honestly right on time. It just was. Now I want to tell y'all a quick story that is on topic of what we're talking about, but kind of relates to what I mean, especially about black people who are in interracial relationships being apprehensive to stand up for themselves and what they know to be something that's just not cool. So I used to have this so-called friend. Yeah, she was a so-called friend. And I won't say any names, but what she did heavily applies to this situation. So her and I were cool for some years, nothing more, like we were literally just friends. Then she started dating this white man after she had a real bad situation with this black man who I believe she was married to. Like, I think he was abusive or something like that. So she would always talk about how he was good to her, talking about this white man was good to her, but then she would also mention some of the slick stuff that he would say. Like, for example, he was a big Trump supporter, and mind you, I don't lean that way on the political spectrum. I don't lean one way or another because I'm mostly apolitical. And usually those white right wing conservatives have a lot of blatant anti-black racism. Anyway, so she tells me they would have arguments a lot because she didn't support Trump because he was a racist, and this white guy would always make like these like little slick comments to her and make all these talking points to tell her how he wasn't a racist, like Trump wasn't a racist. He then told her he was thinking about making a social media page where he talked about all of his conservative views, like actually creating a platform for supporting Trump and other Republicans. And at this point, I think that he said he was going to do it. I think it was really just to spite her and her beliefs. So by this time, I believe that they were engaged. So she's venting to me about all this, and she asked my opinion, and I kept it a buck with her. And I told her he sounds like he's on some white supremacy stuff, straight up. I would say have a conversation with him. This is what I told her. I would say have a conversation with him on how you feel, but I think he pretty much done laid out to you whom he was right then and there, and that tells you what you need to know before you marry him, because she hadn't married him at this point. So apparently she said screw it, and she went ahead and she married him anyway. And I have a lot of reasons why, but I don't want to get messy and go into that because I'm only here to use her as an example for my point. So a year or more, or a little more later, this chick was doing some entrepreneur stuff online, like having live videos on Instagram and shit. I would go in there to support her here and there, just like, any friend would. she's doing this live with her white husband who is there with her, like literally on the live. And she was doing this kind of visioning session or something like that, talking about all these ideas that she had. And she said she wanted to make products to sell, and she wanted to brand it, where she talked a lot about being a black woman in business. And I think she wanted to make some t-shirts to promote her being like this black businesswoman. So this dude gets on there, right? And he starts downplaying all of her ideas and being disrespectful. He talked about how he thinks it's hilarious how black women want to make t-shirts that say shit like black girl magic. And he talked about he was going to make his own line of t-shirts that said white boy magic just to troll her. Now, at this point, this sister was very, very visibly uncomfortable. And I'm like, you my homie, and I want to jump in, but that's your relationship, and I'm not going to get in the middle of all that. She later came back to me and apologized to me, like personally, as if like I was the one who was targeted, but it wasn't me. And then she, I think, started explaining about like how he was acting. I told her that she didn't have to apologize to me. Like, although I appreciate it, she didn't have to apologize to me. And I asked if she was good. I told her that these are the types of things that happen when you marry white dudes, with low-key anti-black vitriol. That was very honest. And that might have been my mistake, is being that level of honest. But I just told her what I felt and what I thought, because that's what she asked of me. She agreed with me, actually. And she said it was there were some weird things that were going on between them. So she would, again, vent here and there. But I asked her if she talk to him at some point, because my thing is like, yo, are you having these conversations with your husband? And I think that she said that she did. Some point down the line, I don't know what happened, but she like blocked me on Instagram and unfriended me on Facebook, and pretty much everywhere, like straight up turned her nose up at me. Mind you, I didn't do any funny business, nothing funny style or anything like that. I didn't try to get on, because I have my black queen at home who I like madly, first of all, in sync with. And my thing is, why would I fuck my own shit up over someone who's confused and just my friend? Anyway, I was shocked, because all this time I just thought that she had taken a social media hiatus, because she would do that sometimes. And I saw that she didn't have her profile anymore, or I saw that like her profile came back up at some point on Facebook, because it said people who you know or whatever. So at the time I'm like, oh, she created a new page, let me just follow her real quick. And turns out it actually was her old page, and she had deleted me. Now, as a friend, I'm like totally baffled, and usually at this point I probably would just burn the bridge and keep it moving. But in this case, I confronted her and I said, what's up? Like, I ain't talked to you in a minute. Like, you good? Like, what's going on? Like, are you just not, did I do something? And she just told me she's just respecting her husband. That's all she said. I proceeded to tell her I wasn't going to rock with her no more after that. It was clear that she told her husband that she had been venting to me. And if you're a dude and you're like, yeah, you got this handsome black man, because I am very handsome. I'm just going to be honest. I'm a very handsome, very, very handsome black man who happened to be her friend that she felt comfortable confiding in. Any dude who like sees that picture probably is going to be uncomfortable, and that's probably how he felt. So I kind of understand that perspective. I don't really blame him. And he don't really know me like that outside of me seeing the shit that he was doing on the live. And anyway, that's kind of like that situation, and that's how all of that went down. I brought that story up to say, like, if you look at that situation, this sister clearly was uncomfortable with this white dude who she's married to, like, doing some like kind of weird stuff, trying to almost sabotage her to a certain extent. And they're married, and it's clear even in her mind that that's just not cool, even when she's having a conversation with me about it. And she like said, you know what, my husband is probably uncomfortable at this point with me talking to you, the dude who's giving you like real gems, because it just seems like there's something funny going on there. And my thing is, that's just a lot of apprehension to call out white supremacy at that point. So I'm like, that's a lot of mess, and I really don't need a friend who's gonna act like that. But regardless, I wasn't trying to say all that to vent. I was just trying to use it as an example to say that these are things that you see a lot of times in these types of interracial relationships, where there is that level of dysfunction because there's that factor of white supremacy there. Anyway, y'all, I have talked quite a bit, and I hope all of that information was very valuable to you all. Again, if you want to continue to hear other podcast episodes that I have coming up in the near future. Stay tuned and feel free to keep checking back at the Pro Black Blurred King podcast. Anyway, I got some things to take care of. I hope that you all have a good rest of y'all's night, and I will talk to you later. Peace.